words we've heard were these. Then they took charge of Jesus, and carrying his own cross, he went out of the city to the place of the skull, or as it was called, Golgotha, where they crucified him with two others, one on either side, with Jesus in the middle. With Jesus in the middle. Well, this is where we are today, at Golgotha or Calvary. We have come to the cross. And as this liturgy goes on today, we will realize that more and more. Now, you may remember that in representations of our Lord's crucifixion, there is often a little skull at the foot of the cross. And that is because, as the Gospel says, he was crucified at a place called the place of the skull, Golgotha. But there is something more, because according to legends, the skull that was buried there was in fact the skull of Adam, the Bible's first man. He was buried there. So Jesus was crucified at the very place where Adam was buried. Now, Christ is sometimes called the new Adam or the second Adam. And so, if you take this, here is the second Adam dying above the grave of the first. And there's another element in these stories as well, that Adam's grave was thought to be the very center of the world. So, Christ was crucified not just in the middle of two robbers or brigands, but in the middle of the earth. Now, these are legends, of course, but like many legends, they conceal something true. Because if God has set the cross where the first human being is buried, then it means that God has gone to the very heart of our condition. He has sent his Son to the center of the world and raised him up, put him on show, we might say, there. We heard this in the first reading. See, my servant will prosper. He shall be lifted up, exalted, rise to great heights, and the crowds will be astonished at him. And Jesus himself said, you remember, and I, when I am lifted up, will draw all things to myself. So today, here is Jesus lifted up at the heart of our situation, at the heart of the world. Now, surely, I know we kind of squirm our way around this, but surely suffering and death are in fact at the center of our lives. The reality is that we are children of fallen Adam. You remember Ash Wednesday, when we have the ashes put upon us, and we hear the words, dust thou art, and unto dust thou shalt return. Now, this doesn't mean, and I don't mean that suffering and death are all there is to our experience, that there's no such things as pleasure and joy and singing and dancing and growth and success and happiness. All those things. I don't mean that we're forever thinking about suffering and death. Often, anyway, we put those things to the edge. But in each of us, and in people we know and love, there they are. We may try and pretend otherwise, but we are creatures that die. We are mortal. And that, even if like Adam's skull, we try to keep underground, even if it's not on the surface of our minds, all that is always there, and it colours everything. Now, we're approaching the general election, for example, and there was a little headline I saw today. If you're fighting for the NHS, cast your vote this way, this particular way. In other words, the most decisive element in the general election is the NHS. But why do we have an NHS? Because we suffer and die. I lived near the town of Elgin for many years. What was the largest building in Elgin? Dr. Gray's Hospital. Think of ARI and all its many satellites here in this city. Carrying his own cross, he went out of the city to the place of the skull. And they crucified him there with two others, one on either side, with Jesus in the middle. Jesus in the middle. And that's why we call this Friday Good. Because now, in the middle of suffering and death, in the middle of the sin that causes them, there rises up the cross of Christ. Now, in another life, it will be different. But for the present, Christ has not taken suffering and death away. He has done something else. Ours were the sufferings he bore, ours the sorrows he carried. He has gone into them, taken them upon himself, into himself, and filled them with himself. And because he is who he is, he has changed them from within. In the very place of death, the place of the skull, he has sown the seed of his resurrection, because he is the resurrection and the life. So what do we take from today? What do we learn from today? When we see the cross, when the cross is lifted up to us, when we come to it, when we kiss it, that at the center of the world there is now something else. Jesus in the middle. Not the skull of Adam, not our pain, but filling them, and stronger than them, the prayer and the tears and the blood of Christ. And they're what count. And they have been heard.